Hello and welcome to Town Meeting TV and the forum for 2020 candidates for Vermont Secretary of State. My name is Susan Clark. I'll be serving as forum moderator. And tonight we are pleased to have with us 3 of the 4 candidates running for the office of Vermont Secretary of State. We have Democrat Jim Condos, who is the incumbent. Hi, Jim.
Hi.
We have Republican H. Brooke Page.
Hello there.
Hey. Independent Pamela Smith.
Hello.
Hey, and not here is Progressive Chris Erickson. So our format tonight is that we'll have 45 minutes together, and we'll begin with each candidate offering a minute and a half for an opening statement. And then we have some questions prepared. And we will also be taking call-in questions from viewers, which will take priority. And every candidate will have a minute and a half to respond to each question. And if there's time, candidates can ask follow-up questions of each other with 30 seconds to respond. And at the end, each candidate will have half a minute or so for closing comments. So just a reminder to viewers that you'll be able to find a recording of this and other candidate forums online anytime at cctv.org. So let's get started with our opening statements. We're just going to cycle through who goes first in alphabetical order. Please tell us why you're running and what experience you bring to the position. So Jim, do you want to start?
Sure. So, and thank you CCTV for holding this forum. I think it's really important, especially in this year, to get out to voters so they can hear us and hear how we feel about certain issues. So from my standpoint, I guess the easiest way to say it is that I love my job. I love going to work every morning. It's something that has been very interesting to me, and I think I've been giving back very well to the state. As far as my experience goes, I have over 30 years of public sector experience. I served on the South Burlington City Council for 18 years. The last 8 of those years, I was the chair. I served in the Vermont Senate for 8 years, and I served as both a chair of education and a chair of government operations. Government operations actually dealt with the Secretary of State's office. And then for the last 10 years, I've been the Secretary of State. And I also have 30 years of business experience. I worked for a Fortune 100 company. I worked for a Vermont-based family-owned $30 million distribution company. And I worked for a regulated utility. I have worked continuously, whether at City Council, Senate, or now in the Secretary of State's office, to promote transparency and good government solutions at all levels. I operate the agency in a nonpartisan way. We have completely transformed the Secretary of State's office from what used to be a paper-driven system prior to 2011 to now a digital environment. Literally,
so that's 90 seconds. We'll keep going.
Literally going from 0% online activity to over 97%. And I'll stop there and we can pick up some of this other stuff later.
Exactly. We will have time. Brooke, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Brooke Page, and I live in the town of Washington, Vermont. My wife Donna and I have lived here since 1987, and for most of that time, I commuted back and forth between Vermont and Philadelphia on a weekly basis in order to make a livelihood so that we could afford to live here in Vermont. In 2008, I wound up coming home full-time because I almost died from congestive heart failure and was able to find somebody to buy my business. Prior to operating my own business, I had been involved in industrial sales for Sterling Drug out of New York City, and later for Hammer Mill Paper before they were bought out by International Paper. So I have broad business experience, including running my own $2.5 million business in Philadelphia. I have a great interest in history and civics and have always followed the political scene here in Vermont. Was some concern as the state has become greater and greater and taken a lot of our personal liberties away from the citizens. And part of that problem is things that are primarily elections that are touched on by the Secretary of State's office. And
That's 90 seconds, just so you know.
okay.
Finish your sentence.
Anyway, we'll touch back on that later. But there's a lot of different things that the Secretary of State's office does, and I think there's several areas, not just elections, where we could use some tuning up and maybe a little fresh air being blown in. That'll do.
All right. Great. Thank you. Pamela Smith.
The Office of Secretary of State is a common career goal for those with a master's degree in public administration, which I have, because though it is an elected position and by all means should stay that way, it is an administrative or management leadership position in the public sector. It requires someone who recognizes the immense value of public services and who can manage the implementation of initiatives meant to benefit the greater good. Jim Condos has said that he is, quote, well known for reaching across the aisle, meaning working with Republicans. The question of election integrity has consumed our society for far too long. Jim Condos insists that the current system is trustworthy, even though many people object to or doubt that assertion. Voters know who they voted for, and adequate assurance that takes into account verification by them is needed. If we could remove a lot of the questions surrounding election security, whether or not the Secretary of State is willing to, quote, reach across the aisle should not be a factor. There's nothing about this administrative office that should be related to party affiliation. I also have 14 years of experience, education, and research in the field of information technology, which would serve the Office of Secretary of State well.
Thank you. Okay, so we will move on to our questions. Here's one that will give you a chance to kind of expand on your opening statement. Question of impact. What will be different for people of the state because you were the one who was elected to this position? So let's start with Brooke.
Okay, I think there's really three areas, or possibly four, that we really need to dig down into. And first of all, it's giving people confidence in the election process. When you're out and about, you have all sorts of people who believe that things are rigged or things are, something's amiss in the election process. And some of that may be true, but it's the perception that's the greatest problem. Mr. Condos has failed to give people confidence that the election process that we currently have is worthwhile. And that's something I'd really want to try to resolve when I get into office. Certainly the current vote by mail mass mailing scheme has done nothing to improve their confidence with the election process. In addition to that, there's problems in the Office of Professional Regulation. There's a lot of individuals who are come under that office, and many people have problems, and when there's complaints, they let go on for years. And many of the professionals wind up not being able to practice during that period of time. In addition to that, Archives has its own unique problems as far as access, especially since it took over the majority of the state library, where previously the collection was open to people. It's not so much anymore. And lastly, just real quick, before Mr. Condos got into office, Deb Markowitz and Jim Douglas before her saw a significant requirement of that office, or an obligation to, as an educational component, to get out and get involved in providing schools with information on civics and how government works and things like that. And in recent years, we haven't seen any of that. I'll leave it there for now.
Great, thank you. All right. Pamela, same question. What will be different for people of the state because you have been elected to this position?
Well, one of my proposed initiatives is to anonymize professional regulation complaints and post them publicly. Part of the mission of the Office of Professional Regulation is to, quote, safeguard the public who may lack a basis for judging what constitutes acceptable quality in service or conduct. Subsection 131 of Title III of Vermont statutes annotated explicitly states that the Office of Secretary of State shall not make public any information about complaints and investigations other than those that are explicitly allowed. I propose that the office does not get to choose what to make public if complaints are anonymized and the reasons for judgment are given. That is accountability. This is what would help citizens to develop a basis for what constitutes acceptable quality in service or conduct. I will fight for citizens' rights. I will fight hard to get this part of the statute changed and implement public posting of anonymized complaints. And in this way, allow citizens as customers to inform their neighbors of their experiences and to publicly notify the industries of how they have been rated so that they can decide to improve their service if they choose. Citizens should not be compelled to patronize service providers without knowledge of what can be expected in industries that can play a large role in life and death.
All right. Jim, you are the last one to answer this question.
Yeah,
All things
and
different.
it looks like I'm a dartboard and I'm just getting these darts thrown at me.
What happens to incumbents?
You don't only get the benefits of being an incumbent.
Privilege of incumbency.
So my experience has really allowed me to lead the Secretary of State's agency to be one of the most effective state agencies in government. We provide Vermonters with good customer service. We provide assistance for the needs that they have. We promote transparency, fiscal responsibility, effective and productive government. My opponents have both cited different aspects of what they would do. I don't know that they actually understand how that law is written, but in any case, we do post any discipline that is done in the Office of Professional Regulation is posted publicly. Unlike, for instance, in the teachers in the education department, those complaints when they reach a discipline are not posted publicly. We posted everything publicly. We do in the area of elections, OPR, our investigators, there are an occasional claim or investigation that may take extra time. We are dealing with people's livelihoods here, and we're also dealing with protecting the public. So I think it is important to recognize that we do have various concerns that we have to follow in the law. We have to protect not only our citizens, but also the people who are being regulated to make sure that it's not a frivolous complaint that's filed against them. And that's the whole reason behind that, Ms. Smith, that the law says that you don't show the lawsuit or the complaint publicly, that you maintain that. And anonymizing it is not the easiest thing to do, because you can still figure out who the person is. But in any case,
that wasn't what I was talking about. I was talking about making it so that you cannot figure it out.
I'm sorry. I'm the one that's speaking now.
Okay, but don't address me then.
I didn't interrupt you when you were mentioned my name. So, as far as the archives go,
that's time, Jim, but we can come back to these. Yeah. Thank you. Do you want to have follow-up on this one? Do you want to take 30 seconds on follow-up on either on the
I don't mind.
Sure. Why don't you each take 30 seconds, Pamela?
Oh, I already said, I was not saying that. When I was saying that it should be anonymized, I was saying that any part of it that was indicative of place or parties should be removed. So that could be done as the case is being assessed. So it would just be a a story for people to read in terms of the industry, not in terms of any particular actors.
Okay.
What could happen in the industry? So the collection of them is what might end up being important.
Okay. Did you want to respond, Jim? 30 seconds.
I would just say that I understand what Ms. Smith is saying, but I think the concern is that it's not as easy as you think it is. The Office of Professional Regulation receives over 800 complaints per year that we have to deal with, that we have to investigate, that we have to either prosecute or allow to go away. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on here. And, like most of the state government, we don't have a lot of staff. We have a very minimal staff, and we're very efficient. We're much more efficient today than we were 2 years ago or 5 years ago. But there's a lot of work that would have to be done. We would have to have additional staff just to do what you're asking for.
Okay. Brooke, did you want to take 30 seconds
Yeah,
on this?
Sure. My concerns with OPR, I hear a lot of things anecdotally, but one case I'm very familiar with, it happens to be the surveyor that I've used for years. I'm in the land use program, so I have to have my property reblazed. And I know that the fellow that I use is very scrupulous. I mean, to a fault sometimes. And he wound up with a complaint against him that kept him from practicing for over 2 years. And eventually, he still hasn't had a resolution, and he decided just to retire. Of course, now I've got to go out and find another land surveyor. But independent of that, this is a guy that I knew for 30 years who, certainly did not deserve to have his career come to an end in this way. That's all.
Okay, thanks. Great. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. And this one is about election security. And Pamela, you can start us off with this one. One of the jobs of Vermont Secretary of State is to oversee election security. What more needs to be done to encourage widespread voting and ensure people's participation in the democratic process? And as an add-on to this one, do you support non-citizen voting? So Pamela, you want to start us off?
Sure. I would like to implement a function in the voting process that allows voters to verify the correct recording of their votes. Layers of security are necessary, but one essential layer that is missing is the confirmation or rejection of that record of a voter's votes by the voter, him or herself. They alone know what the correct record should look like. The first outcome that I would hope to see as a result of this implementation is for there to be a greater pool of candidates running for elected office. A healthy candidate pool can be indicative of voter confidence and should lead to greater voter turnout as well. Regarding whether I support non-citizen voting, an answer requires more knowledge of immigration policy than I currently have. Are there situations where permanent residents are so for an exceedingly long time without becoming citizens? Stuff like that. So I don't know enough to answer that question.
Jim, do you want to take a whack at this one? Election security and
Sure. So
non-citizen voting?
protecting our elections is really my number one priority. And to that end, we have some very basic solutions that we have already implemented over the years. And stuff that we have done while I've been in office. One, we've mandated paper ballots. Those paper ballots are the record of the voters, and they're sealed and stored for 22 months. We do a post-election audit within 30 days of the general election, and it has a high statistical confidence level for Vermonters to know that the vote totals are accurate. We do of cybersecurity. We do vulnerability and risk assessments. We do penetration testing. We work with the Department of Homeland Security out of Washington and do a weekly cyber hygiene scan. We have multi-factor authentication for access to direct access to the back end of our systems, so that if anybody wants to get in, it's kind of like the bank authentication. We do a daily backup of our voter registration system. We blacklist known and suspected IP addresses. We have several layers of firewalls. We are a member of the MS-ISAC, the multi-state Information Sharing Analysis Center, and we have an Albert monitor which tracks all incoming traffic from the internet. We do secure the secure the human training, and we have 24/7 monitoring. We also have worked to remove barriers that have placed obstructions in the way of voter access. We believe strongly that the more eligible voters who vote, the stronger our democracy. And as far as non-citizen voting, before 1900, it was not uncommon. Between 1900 and 1920, many restrictions began to fall into place. Federal statutes are explicit that non-citizens are not allowed to vote in federal elections. And in recent years, we have seen a few localities around the country that have allowed non-citizen voting on local issues. And here in Vermont, Montpelier has voted to allow it. Burlington and Winooski may follow soon, but it still requires action by the legislature and a signature by the governor.
Okay. Brooke, do you want to?
Very good. Big question. I'm not sure that we're getting through the whole thing here, but the one grace that Vermont's election process has is that we don't have a whole lot of people that vote. I think the voter registration is around 400,000. And as a result of that, we're allowed to remain with paper ballots and local processing. And in my little town, we actually don't have a tabulator, and we just count up the ballots by hand. In larger towns, they have the tabulator and all of this. But still, it's all isolated within each polling location to a final resolve. And then those results are then transmitted to the Secretary of State's office individually. So there's not a lot of room for nefarious going on once the ballots have been counted. The problem is that before that, especially as we've expanded early in absentee voting, and now we've had what I call elections gone wild, where we're mailing out ballots to everybody on the voter checklist. We have no way of authenticating those votes in the security envelopes as they come back. All a person's required to put on the outside is they print their name, they print their town, and they sign. But we have no signatures samples on file. We have no other information that they could provide to authenticate that, in fact, the ballot that's arrived back with the town clerk is, in fact, the expressed desire of those voters. And this lack of authentication was acceptable when the voter would contact the town clerk or the city clerk and ask for a ballot. The town clerk would send it out. The voter was anticipating that ballot coming. And in fact, the town clerk was anticipating seeing that ballot come back.
That's time.
Okay, let me.
Yep. One last sentence.
This is the biggest problem. As far as non-citizens voting, I think that citizenship is a right, and with that, you have a privilege of being able to vote. It seems odd to desire to have people who aren't citizens voting for the leaders of our state and of our nation. I'll call it
so
there.
you'd be opposed to that?
Oh, definitely, yes.
Yeah. Do any of you need 30 seconds follow up on this one? This was a complex question.
Well, I'd like to respond.
Okay.
Did I lose you guys?
No, I lost Jim too.
I think Jim is, yeah. Murphy's Law, right? He was just about.
Well, no, it's probably some of that cybersecurity he was bragging about there. Is he back, or we've really lost him?
Oh boy. Good question.
He might come back. Maybe we should start the next questions.
You could move on to the next one.
Different order.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Unless our operators have any suggestions for us, I guess we should move on.
Now it's completely gone.
He's probably trying to get back.
Yeah.
Anyway. why don't we continue on, and then hopefully he can pick up on the next question.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny because my chat function isn't working either, so. Okay. Well, the next question is another one about roles. Part of elections oversight and protecting democracy is maintaining a good working relationship with town and city clerks. Are clerks prepared to handle, do you think, potential foreign election tampering? And how will you communicate with and assist clerks is the question. Let's see. So Brooke, why don't we start with you on that one?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, the town and city clerks and the local election officials are the key to our elections. They're in a normal year where we didn't have all of the excitement over C-19 and have this mass mailing, they're the ones who are best equipped to know who should be getting absentee and early votes and who should be showing up at the polling place and voting. They're the ones that, to the extent that we have a voter checklist, they're the ones most familiar with the citizens of the town and who should be voting. My biggest concern has been, as I've gone around the state and chatted with people, there's a lot of difference of opinion with the town clerks and the local boards of civil authority as to how the election should proceed. And the process in one area is not the same as the process in another town. And I think that this unevenness is a potential problem that needs to be addressed. And it's everything from what's, in the election just passed, if the it was a ballot or a vote considered defective because the non-voted ballots were not returned, if they were returned but they weren't in the non-voted envelope, and so in some towns those votes were rejected, in other towns they were allowed to be counted, and that's a major problem where you're disenfranchising people. In fact, in the previous primary, over 6,000 votes were rejected and not counted.
All right. Thanks, Brooke.
Yep.
You're back, Jim.
He is.
Yeah, and let me address the issue of defective ballots.
In a minute. Actually, just a second, because we do want to come to that, but we're actually on Pamela, and the question of whether clerks are, the whole question of election oversight, and are clerks prepared to handle potential, foreign election tampering, and how will you communicate with and assist clerks? So Pamela, why don't you take a whack at that?
Okay, well, my answer to that is 80% of Vermont's votes are counted with a vote tabulator machine. Reading the guide to Vermont's vote tabulators from the Secretary of State's page definitely made me dizzy more than once before I was done. One of the benefits of having me as Secretary of State is that I would place high value on simplicity. A town clerk lacking clarity of the process would not be the strongest defense against foreign election tampering. Assaults on election integrity can take place in a number of places, points in time, and forms. Physical and electronic intrusion with the purpose of corrupting the results in one way or another could be better avoided if some confusion is removed from the process. I will communicate with and assist clerks in whatever way works best and is necessary. I would intend to work on making the webpage serve enough of the required functions between our office and municipal offices so as to limit the need for repeatedly constructing clarification. I would imagine the Secretary of State's webpage to consist of more tables and decision trees. I would intend to use more graphics versus paragraph upon paragraph. I hope to make the webpage easier to use for both municipal officials and citizens.
Okay, great. Jim, are you clear on which question we're on?
I assume it was number 4, the role of elections oversight, part of the elections oversight.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just start by saying that Vermont's town clerks are among the municipal government's hardest working officials. Their duties vary, but they are one of the most key individuals in our cities and towns. We work with Vermont's town clerks on a literally everyday basis. We have no authority over them, but we provide resources, education, training, and advice. We actually meet with a group of clerks periodically to go over issues of concern or need. And we work with clerks on legislative action. Since 2016 and the Russian intervention, we've added multi-factor authentication to all town clerks and staff members who need to access the Vermont election management system. We provide secure the human cyber training and to our election staff, but also to all the town clerks. And we, during the election cycle, we're providing at least weekly bulletins on specific election topics during the lead up to the election day. During the election year, all town clerks are required to attend an election training seminar. To that end, what we did in 2015 was we implemented a new Vermont election management system, which is state of the art and provides for one of the most accurate checklists in the country. It provides easy access for the clerks to be able to register people, to be able to move them from one town to another, one district to another. Am I still around?
Yep.
You're still there. Your time's up.
Okay.
You're there, but you're cut off.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to give us to question number 9. It's an interesting one, especially for this multi-party group here. This question is about partisan politics. The Secretary of State's office is a very important nonpartisan office, and yet it is an elected position. Do you feel it's important that we continue to elect our Vermont Secretary of State? And if so, why? Jim, you didn't get to start the last one first, so do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. During my 10 years in office, I've consistently operated the office in a nonpartisan manner, and I demand that also from my staff. As Vermont's chief election officer, I cannot appear to be partisan. As a result, from my standpoint, I have never endorsed any federal, state, or local candidate running for office. In fact, just this year, I asked the legislature to add to the statute that would prevent any SOS candidate from endorsing any candidate. It is important that people maintain, even though we run as a partisan, we have to maintain the manner of nonpartisanship throughout the office. Electing the Secretary of State is actually in the Vermont Constitution and would require a constitutional amendment, which could take several years, at least 4 or 5 anyway. It's in Chapter 2, Article 48, and it says the Secretary of State and Auditor of Accounts shall be elected by the voters of the state upon the same ticket with the governor, lieutenant governor, and treasurer, and the legislature shall carry this provision into effect by appropriate legislation. Election by the voters holds our statewide officials accountable and are accountable directly to the people. My personal feeling is I would not change that. I would leave it that way. But I do think that it's as I said, it's very important that the Secretary of State, because of being the chief elections officer, operate in a nonpartisan manner. And I've received accolades from Republicans, progressives, Democrats, independents, you name it, who believe that I am doing the right thing.
Thank you, Jim. All right. And Brooke, you next on this one.
Okay, very good. I think it's important that the Secretary of State, as well as the Attorney General and Auditor of Accounts, that all of these be elected positions, mainly because the alternative is unthinkable. There was discussion a couple years back about making the Attorney General's office be a appointed position from the governor's office, and like the Secretary of State's office, they in fact fall under the executive branch but are independently elected. So it would be problematic for any of those offices to be appointed, because then the office holder would be beholden to the governor, or if they were selected by the legislature, be beholden to the legislature. As far as nonpartisan, I agree with Secretary Condos that it should be nonpartisan, but he frequently appears in the Unity Day meeting a couple weeks ago for the Democratic candidates. I also remember seeing that he was a delegate to the 2016 Democratic convention, and there's pictures of him raucously cheering for Mrs. Clinton. So I'm not quite sure that his purity oath is always being carried out as it should be. I agree that the office, as far as its functions, should be completely nonpartisan. But if you're running for office, it's difficult to have a nonpartisan position completely. I guess that covers it.
Thank you, Brooke. Pamela?
The official responsible for overseeing the integrity of elections should be nothing other than an elected position. The Professional Regulation Division was established in this office because of its purpose to, quote, protect the citizens against unethical, incompetent, or otherwise unprofessional behavior by licensed practitioners. Both the elections and the Office of Professional Regulation Divisions are specifically established to serve the whole population of the state in a governmental capacity. It would be an incredibly hard fight to win to take away the right of the citizens to choose this position. The Secretary of State's offices in different states take on different forms. In Vermont, the office includes a number of very important functions, making it a comparatively difficult job to fill. However, there is no one personality or one set of experiences or skills that can lead this office. Just as important is that the citizens can trust the election process.
Thank you. Okay. Interesting question number 10 on our list here about sort of the general climate. Big issues like climate change, immigration reform, racial justice, and healthcare. They touch the lives of Vermonters through the office of Secretary of State. So how would you use this office to improve the lives of all Vermonters in light of such large political and social issues? Pamela, you want to start us off?
Sure. Having an election system that attracts more high quality candidates and that further compels voters to make a choice of a representative is what will have an effect on big issues. Voters decide if they can trust the process. No one tells them whether or not they should have trust. Jim Kondos likes to insist that we should trust the system. He has had access to millions of dollars to be used to increase voter turnout. I would say that he has not chosen the best route toward this end. It helps to be a registered voter and to have ballots on hand, and it is also handy and entertaining to see real-time unofficial results on election night. However, if this year's candidate pool says anything, citizens are not all of a sudden feeling comfortable. Both Jim Kondos and H. Brooke Page ran uncontested races in the primary. If there's not a strong showing to run against the incumbent Secretary of State, it is not citizens' problems. The fault lies in the current system and the current leadership. If you didn't vote in the primary this past September, don't let anyone tell you that you should feel bad about yourself. More than 12,000 Democrats and more than 16,000 Republicans chose to not vote for anyone, then to circle the one dot available to them. A high-quality sound pool of candidates will be better equipped to work together and affect needed change.
Thanks, Pamela.
Yeah.
Okay, Jim, do you want to address this one?
Sure. When we are constantly reviewing everything that we do, no matter what division, whether it's the archives, OPR, corporations registration, which really hasn't been mentioned today, and elections, we constantly are looking at how we can do things better. As a second generation American, all four of my grandparents came from overseas. Immigration is personal for me. Immigration Immigrants have been welcome into this country since our founding. Immigrants came to this country for a better life and for opportunities for their families. Immigrants are the people who helped build this country into what it is. It is really disheartening for me to see how immigrants are being treated these days by the current administration. Immigrants do have a lot to offer us all. For instance, as a result of the pandemic and our abilities to work remotely, some state employees may not travel to a work site in the future, saving energy costs, saving on lost time, and not adding any additional global warming gases. So it really is a huge issue. Racial justice has been a big topic for us, as well as we have, excuse me, we have constantly looked at in the elections area. We have worked with the New American Communities for new citizens in Burlington and Winooski, not because we had to do it, because we wanted to do it. And in Vermont, incarcerated individuals and those with felonies never lose their right to vote. The League of Women Voters are currently working with the Department of Corrections to ensure those that are eligible are actually able to register and vote. OPR, we've done a lot with OPR to provide a gateway out of poverty and a ticket to a better life. The OPR, obtaining a professional license can be a challenge for some due to their life circumstances, and we know that this can disproportionately affect communities of color. We've been at the forefront, and we've actually been recognized nationally by the President's Office, by the Council of State Governments and the National Conference of State Legislatures for our licensing reforms that we have completed.
Okay, so I want to make sure to give Brooke a time on this one. Thanks, Jim. That's up.
Very good. Looking at all of these issues, the most important thing we can do is engage our citizens to get involved, to listen to candidates who have a more direct relationship to these issues. The security of our election process and getting people involved, not just to go down to the voting place on election day, but to learn about what the issues are and what the candidates stand for, is far more important than if they have an R or D or an I or some other designation after their name. And while Secretary Condos has been big on getting young folks, college kids, to sign up and vote, last go round he had put out a tweet to that nature. I think it's more important that we get citizens who have a vested interest here, who have set their lives here, to get involved, understand the issues, and to vote for the most responsible candidates, using a secure election system. And one thing I haven't mentioned previously, and see if I can slide it in here, is an important part of making sure our elections are secure and trustworthy is voter ID. And I know this is something that Secretary Condos has fought adamantly against, claiming that somehow engaging a trustworthy voter ID system would somehow lead to voter suppression. And my only thoughts are, if it did, it would only because of the shortcomings of his own office in implementing such a system.
Thank you. Thanks for these very thoughtful answers from all of you. There are so many more important issues that we could be talking about that are related to the Secretary of State's office. So I hope that folks will tune into additional conversations that you are having and follow those, as well as the other candidates forums at CCTV. So thank you.
Susan, thank you for having all of us. It's wonderful to be able to engage as best we can, given the restrictions of C-19. We're all kind of hiding out in our homes here and doing these Zoom things, which is very uncomfortable for me. I'm used to getting out and engaging my fellow constituents and my the folks that I'm.
We all can't wait to see each other in more normal circumstances again, and including seeing our families and our fellow voters. So
thank you.
Thank you, Susan. It was nice debating with you, Jim and Brooke.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, Brooke.
Yep.